Welcome back to my Crochet 101 series, where today I'm going to be covering Tapestry Crochet. And don't worry, because this video is for complete beginners. So whether you have 10 projects under your belt or zero, I hope that this video suits you and maybe you learn something that you didn't know before or are inspired. My objective is going to be to inform viewers of a niche crochet technique known as Tapestry Crochet, outline skills needed for projects, and then also give tips on creating these pieces. So what is tapestry crochet? Well, the first word of it, tapestry, refers to a thick piece of textile fabric, and typically it has these elaborate pictures on there. You've probably seen things that incorporate designs such as mandalas or even flowers. When we say tapestry crochet, we're essentially saying something in the same vein. We're creating these fabric pieces that have elaborate designs and patterns by introducing color changing. So what about the skills that are actually needed? Well, firstly, knowledge of fundamental stitches, things like single crochet, double crochet, half double crochet. If none of these are, if these terms are foreign to you, I do have a video that goes over these stitches. But in general, as long as you know any of the fundamental stitches, you should be good. Single crochet, which is typically one of the first stitches that people learn when they learn crochet, is a common thing that you'll see when creating these designs. Next up is color changing, which, aside from fundamental stitches, is probably one of the more crucial skills needed. No matter which of these stitches that you decide to go for, whenever you're actually joining the new color, you usually join it before the last yarn over or pull through. So for most of the stitches, it will be the last two loops left on the hook, other than half double crochet, because obviously when you're doing a half double crochet, instead of pulling through two and then pulling through the last two like a double crochet, you would essentially just pull through all three at the same time. If this is confusing, no worries. I've included an article or two on the concept of color changing that does a really good job of using pictures as well as great descriptions going to talk you through the process of color changing. We also have yarn carrying / floating that is pretty important. Now, when we say yarn carrying or floating, it's pretty much just terms that label what you do with the non-working yarn. So when you say carrying the yarn, you would crochet over your non-working piece or the color you're not using continuously. Whereas when you float yarn, you would crochet over that non-working piece in increments. So this first picture on the left, this is an example of floating yarn. So your backs are going to look fairly similar, where you'd have certain pieces, certain parts of this non-working piece that are hidden from the wrong side, but then you have other ones where it's not hidden. This method your backs aren't gonna look as clean because you're obviously gonna see like pieces of it where it wasn't crocheted over, but it can be fairly easy, especially if you're dealing with like multiple pieces of yarn where you don't necessarily want to carry your yarn or crochet over it continuously. However, if you want cleaner backs, like I talked about, where it's almost reversible in a sense, then carrying yarn might be your best bet. Overall, I wouldn't necessarily say that I have a method for or against. I think each method kind of has their place, and sometimes it'll depend on what you prefer. Sometimes it'll depend on what you're going for in your piece. Then you also need finishing methods. So when I talk about finishing methods, it's just knowing how to weave in your ends. So there's nothing new here. In no matter what project you're working on, whether it's tapestry crochet or something else, you're going to need a pretty fundamental knowledge of weaving in your ends. So as long as you maybe have some projects under your belt and you've kind of gotten that down, you should be good here. Next up, we're going to go over how exactly this works. So you would have a design or pattern, whether you made it or you got it from somewhere. In this case, I decided to use this pretty simple example of an Uno reverse card. Now, generally speaking, you'd have a minimum of 2 colors, because otherwise if you had one color, it would just be like a piece of fabric. And that, as we talked about before with tapestry pieces, part of what makes it have the cool designs is that you're changing colors. In this case, we have 3 colors. Now, if you're using, for instance, 2 colors, it is common practice sometimes for your main or primary color to be noted with like MC, which typically refers to main color. If you're working from like a pattern or something, it usually denotes what it calls it when it's giving you the instructions. But in this case, we're just going to label the colors A, B, and C, which is another common practice. So here, the colors A, B, and C are going to refer to red, white, and black. Now, most will be associated with some type of numbers or dimensions. In this case, this is a 33 by 50, and these numbers are going to refer to the pixels, or in our case, stitches. So when we say 33, that's in reference to the length of this piece, which is going to be 33 stitches long and then 50 rows high. Not necessarily indicative of dimensions, because that's going to depend on things like your gauge, which, your hook size. So if you have a bigger or smaller hook, it's going to make it like be sized differently. So if we zoom in, just to get a better picture on, like how exactly we'd create this picture, you would start at a certain point. Most commonly, you're going to start at the bottom right corner, but if you want to start at the bottom left corner or even one of the top corners, that's fine too, as long as you just follow the notation of working back and forwards. So you would start, let's say in this example, in the bottom right corner, and then you'd work stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on in this direction. But then when you're going to actually do the next row, make sure that you're reading your graph and working the stitches accordingly, now from left to right. And you're just going to work that back and forth. And of course, we briefly talked about color changing, but when you get to, like, for instance, here, from here to here, where you're working the white versus then going to working the red, that's when then you'd implement the color change. Now I'm going to talk about some tips. So when first starting, I do recommend doing smaller projects. So projects that have smaller numbers of stitches for smaller amounts of rows, just to get started, and then also with minimal colors used, because sometimes you'll have small ones that have a lot of color changes, and especially if you're not very familiar with doing that, it could get overwhelming. The yarn management alone with the different colors can get overwhelming. So start small, start simple. Eventually you can work your way up to more complicated pieces that probably look more visually appealing, but that's something I recommend as a beginner. Second is going to be strategic. I did go over carrying versus floating yarn. There's also the concept of having like localized mini skeins, which is prevalent in things like intarsia crochet. And so just think about sort of the design of the piece, and that'll oftentimes, like the design of the piece, the number of colors you're using, that'll sort of can guide your choice of, what you decide to do with your non-working yarn, or how you decide overall to work the piece. Then this tip's going to be for what I call like yarn organization. And so what this tip is essentially is, if you're working on your right side, which is going to be just the side where that's facing you, you're going to want to turn that left side of your piece from the left side over to the right side, and that's going to keep it organized. And then when you're working the wrong side and you're trying to go back to that right side, you would then flip your right side to face the left. It's probably confusing, and I'm sorry for that, but that's going to help you with like keeping your yarn organized. That way, no matter which side you're working on, it's not getting tangled. Next up, I have, it's sort of a tip, but it's essentially going to be like sources where you can get different designs or even inspiration for different designs. So Pinterest is a really good one. You would just type in, like, let's say you have an idea for something, whether it be a character or like a style. You can insert the name of that or whatever, and after it, alpha pattern. You can also go to Stitch Fiddle. That's really good for if you have like an idea for a design and you want to like hand make it. There's also braceletbook.com, which when you're finding ones on Pinterest, it's pretty common for it to come from braceletbook.com. And then also Etsy, if you're willing to pay for certain patterns, which I do recommend. They have really cute ones, and it's a good way to support the designers of these, because it does take some time for certain things to like really go and design it and make it visually appealing, but also like doable. Also, the benefit for the Etsy ones is that they actually have the written out instructions, where, I mean, you can obviously go on free sources like Pinterest. It's just going to take a little bit like more patience because you're working from the graph. You can also import them into, like, let's say you have one that you found on Pinterest, and import it to a software where it makes it easier to follow along with directions. But that's a benefit of an Etsy pattern, is that it's typically taking that grid and it's writing the instructions out, which might be more helpful for you. The next one. So similar to crochet, like other pieces, there is sort of like a configuration that I recommend, especially if you're starting out, which is to utilize a type 4 yarn because it's kind of in the middle of the scale. And it's not too thin or too bulky, because if it's too thin, especially if you're like cross using different types of yarn for the same piece. So let's say you used for this one right here, that's red and white, you used a thin red color, so that's like a type 3, and then you use a type 4 for the white. Any place that you had where you were trying to carry the yarn, let's say, with the red, or with the white, it would show through because it's a thicker consistency. Overall, type 4 I recommend because it's in the middle, so it's not going to be too thin or too bulky, but also like sort of like a 5B is that when you're using the different colors, make sure that they're the same type of yarn, because that's going to help with the visual of it looking and blending in seamlessly, especially around where you have those color changes. And then we have, don't forget the gauge swatch. So I kind of briefly hinted towards that when I talked about how no matter how many stitches and rows of the stitches that you have for your piece, it's not necessarily a given how big it's going to be, because that's going to depend on what like hook and yarn configuration you're using. So make sure to do a gauge swatch, especially if it's important, like the desired measurements. So like sometimes I'll do pieces and I'm trying to make it, let's say, fit to be a pillowcase, and I have a specific cushion that's a certain size. I'm obviously going to want that piece to measure out to be a certain size. So doing a gauge swatch is really important so that I can make sure when I'm creating the piece that it's going to give me those dimensions and not too big or too small. If you don't care, then you can kind of choose your favorite hook, favorite kind of yarn, and then go from there. But let's say you're using it for garments and things like that, you might care about the dimensions. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching if you got this far, and I hope you have a really great day.